Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a really difficult and disturbing case. Elliot Rodger and the 2014 Isla Vista killings.
Yeah, it's definitely heavy stuff.
Our goal isn't to give his actions any more attention than they deserve, certainly not to sensationalize them, but more to try and understand the factors involved.
Exactly. We're looking at sources. You shared analyses of his YouTube stuff, readings from his writings, discussions from those online spaces he was part of.
It's really sensitive material, obviously.
Absolutely. And respect for the victims, their families, that's front and center here. We want to trace how his mindset developed, maybe identify indicators, but, be really careful not to pathologize normal struggles.
Right. And look at the wider context, too, maybe societal factors.
Yeah. Without justifying anything he did. It's about unpacking the complexity, not excusing the violence.
Okay, so let's start maybe earlier on. His formative years. He was born in England, right?
That's right. Born in England, then moved to the U.S. His parents were in the film industry.
And even back then, it sounds like there were difficulties. The sources mention his parents' divorce having a big impact.
A huge impact, yeah. And his father remarrying Samaya, Elliot's stepmother. Well, that seemed to be a real point of contention for him. He didn't react well to her or his stepbrother.
It's strange, isn't it? Because he had this quite privileged upbringing, materially at least.
It is. But these feelings of inadequacy, they seem really strong, really pervasive from early on.
Do the sources give us any clues why? Why they were so amplified for him?
Well, they do paint a picture of him being very shy, quite insecure, even from a young age. There's that really stark quote from a family friend.
Oh, yeah.
Describing him as broken from the moment of conception, which is...
Yeah,
wow.
That's intense.
It is. So despite the material comfort, there's this constant theme of feeling like he didn't measure up, being the shortest kid in class, feeling weaker than other boys. Mm-hmm. And those early experiences, they could definitely feed into a really fragile sense of self, maybe make someone more prone to resentment when they feel they're falling short.
Yeah. That makes sense. And there were specific things too, right? Like feeling jealous of his friend James?
Right, yeah. Jealous when James had other friends, or when a girl named Maddie played with his sister instead of him. Little things, maybe, but they seem to have stuck with him.
And the clashes with his stepmother, Samaya, over rules and things.
Yeah, those conflicts seem pretty significant too. Discipline, household rules, major friction points.
So you have this real contrast of like the comfortable life on one hand and this intense sort of social awkwardness and bitterness on the other.
Exactly. He seemed very aware of school social structures, the cool kids versus the others, and felt like he was firmly on the outside.
And his mixed race identity, did that play into it?
It seems like it did. The sources mention him being aware of being half white, half Asian, feeling different from his white classmates. There was even that attempt to dye his hair blonde.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, suggesting a real desire to fit in with that group, maybe some internal conflict about his identity.
Yeah. And then something else pretty significant happened in middle school, according to the source.
Right. The first time he encountered pornography online.
And the sources say it had a really profound and quite negative impact.
Yes, very disturbing for him, it seemed. It likely warped his developing ideas about, relationships, intimacy.
And around the same time, he started escaping into World of Warcraft.
Yeah, that became a big escape. A place where he could maybe feel more competent, more in control than he felt in his real life.
Okay, so moving on. As he got older, these, maybe obsessions is the right word, they seem to have intensified.
Definitely. The sources talk about a growing fixation on money and on his appearance.
And the lottery thing, that seems quite bizarre.
It really does. It's almost magical thinking that winning the lottery would just fix everything, solve all his problems.
But how does that connect, you think? Money, appearance, the lottery?
Well, it seems connected to his desire for relationships, strangely enough. He appeared to believe that being wealthy, looking a certain way, would automatically make him attractive to women.
Ah, okay.
And when that didn't happen, it fueled this intense, hatred and envy towards couples he saw, especially young, attractive ones.
The Barnes & Noble story comes to mind.
Exactly. Seeing couples there apparently triggered such rage he had to, hide in the bathroom to calm down. It just shows how volatile he was becoming.
It's shocking. And that envy, it seems to have just curdled into this deep misogyny.
Absolutely. He started blaming women entirely for his unhappiness. There are quotes like, "My life has been wasted all because women hate me so much."
And his descriptions of women, they're just vile.
Horrific. He saw them as flawed, mentally wrong, even vicious, stupid, cruel animals.
Yeah.
Just completely dehumanizing, controlled by primal, depraved emotions, attracted only to barbaric men.
And then he had his revelation.
Yes, the so-called brilliant, perfect revelation. His idea that women shouldn't even have the right to choose who they mate with.
That civilized men of intelligence should make that choice for them.
Right. It's chilling. It shows this deeply authoritarian, misogynistic ideology really taking hold, thinking of women as a plague that must be quarantined.
Just awful. And then he found places online where people seem to agree with him.
Unfortunately, yes. He found online communities, forums, where other men were voicing similar hateful ideas.
And that just reinforced it all for him.
It acted like an echo chamber, validating his views, amplifying them, making it harder for him to see outside that distorted perspective, isolating him further in a way.
So while he was isolating in these online groups, he was also documenting his own life, wasn't he, on YouTube?
Yes, he was putting himself out there, expressing these frustrations, particularly about, not attracting women.
But his private journals, they show something even darker.
Much darker. They reveal this profound loneliness, constant feelings of rejection, and this growing desire for revenge.
That quote is terrifying. If I can't have what I desire, then the only thing to live for is to punish those who denied it to me.
It's a clear signal, isn't it? A shift towards really violent thinking.
And he wasn't just thinking in general terms. There were specific violent fantasies.
Horrifyingly specific. Fantasies about attacking couples, bursting into rooms and slashing them. It's deeply disturbing to read those accounts.
It really is.
And alongside these fantasies, you have this intense self-pity, this feeling of injustice, that he, a self-proclaimed gentleman of intelligence, was still a virgin.
While also believing he was superior, like a god.
Yeah, that I am like a god statement. It points to this dangerous mix of insecurity, narcissism, entitlement, and a complete detachment from reality.
It's also strange how, amidst all this internal turmoil, he was still focused on projecting this image of wealth in his...
Right. Mentioning the overseas holidays, the expensive clothes, designer brands.
What do you make of that contrast?
I think it speaks volumes about his insecurity. He's claiming superiority, but he desperately needs external validation through these shallow displays. It highlights how fractured his sense of self was.
And the labels he gave himself: perfect guy, supreme gentleman.
It feels like a desperate attempt to build himself up, to create this persona that was completely at odds with his internal reality and, frankly, his behavior.
Which brings us to his attempts at, self-improvement or fitting in. They seemed kind of doomed from the start.
They did, didn't they? Like trying to play basketball to get taller, even though he knew he wasn't good at it.
Yeah.
Or the karate classes, where he apparently got annoyed by a 12-year-old brown belt being better than him. It shows this inflated ego again, this inability to handle not being the best.
He was involved in bodybuilding too, wasn't he? And online forums related to that.
Yes, bodybuilding.com. But again, it seems the motivation was less about genuine interest and more about achieving a certain look for external validation.
And underlying all this was extreme shyness, social anxiety.
Crucially, yes. The sources suggest that even when people did try to include him, he often pushed them away or shut down.
So it wasn't just others excluding him.
No, it seems his own anxiety, maybe a fear of rejection or vulnerability, made him sabotage potential connection. His expectations were just off.
Like expecting women to just approach him or sitting in the Domino's parking lot.
Exactly. It shows a fundamental lack of understanding about how social interaction actually works. And then there's that really bizarre super soaker incident.
Oh, right. Filling it with orange juice.
Yeah, and planning to spray couples in a park.
Wow.
Such strange maladaptive behavior, showing that resentment bubbling up in weird ways.
There was also that incident that showed a racial element to his resentment.
Yes, the anecdote about his negative reaction to seeing a black boy with a white girl he found attractive.
So it wasn't just misogyny.
It seems not. It looks like a nasty intersection of misogyny, racial prejudice, and that deep-seated entitlement, feeling like he was owed something, perhaps partly based on race.
Even jealousy towards his own younger brother.
Yeah, apparently because his brother was more socially successful. It highlights how deep his insecurity and envy ran across different areas of his life.
And that party incident where he got drunk easily and confronted someone.
Right? Getting drunk on very little wine, behaving badly, confronting an Asian man who was talking to a white woman. It just shows the volatility, the prejudice, the lack of social skills all colliding.
Let's talk about his family, because the sources are clear. They did try to help him.
They did. Therapy from a young age, attempts to support him.
But it was complicated.
Very. His relationship with his stepmother, Samaya, sounds like it was constantly fraught. Arguments, him refusing to accept her authority, just ongoing tension.
And his relationship with his father, Peter.
Also very strange. Conflicts over money, Peter's relationship with the Samaya, the emails Elliot sent his father, they're really harsh.
Those leaked emails, they really show his mindset, don't they?
They really do. Bitter, entitled, manipulative, just full of resentment, even though his family was still supporting him financially. There's a real lack of empathy evident.
Which leads to that welfare check by the police just before the attacks.
Such a critical moment. His parents were worried enough to call them.
But he managed to convince the officers everything was okay.
He did.
Yeah.
And it's just tragic. A major missed opportunity, though hindsight is always 20/20. It raises tough questions about interventions and assessing risk when someone can put up a convincing front.
And then, inevitably, we get to the planning and the attacks themselves.
Yeah. The sources detail how he started researching methods, knife attacks, initially.
But then he bought firearms.
Yes, he purchased several guns, Glock 34, P226 are mentioned. That was a definite escalation in his planning.
He even delayed his planned day of retribution, didn't he?
He did, yeah, because he had a cold and because his father was home. It shows a level of cold calculation, premeditation.
And then the final video.
Uploaded to YouTube, his final manifesto, laying out his plans for revenge against everyone he felt had wronged him, against humanity, really.
A truly chilling prelude to what came next.
Absolutely. The stabbings of his roommates and the visitor in the apartment, and then driving through Isla Vista, shooting people, running them down with his car. Just horrific, senseless violence.
The loss of life, the injuries.
Yeah.
Devastating.
Truly devastating. And the aftermath, well, it sparked a huge reaction.
Including those hashtags, #NotAllMen and #YesAllWomen.
Right. They really captured the polarized debate that followed. One side emphasizing that Rodger wasn't representative of all men, the other highlighting the reality of misogyny in women's experience.
But perhaps most disturbingly, Rodger himself became this figure in certain online communities.
Yeah, the Incel communities. He's been sort of canonized, is the word used in some sources, referred to as the supreme gentleman.
And his violence euphemized as going ER.
It's incredibly disturbing. This idolization, it shows the danger of these online echo chambers and the potential for radicalization, for inspiring copycat acts.
And sadly, his name has been referenced by others who committed or planned violence.
Yes, like Alec Manassian in the Toronto van attack. It shows the dangerous legacy this kind of act can leave.
People still debate that welfare checkup. Could more have been done?
It's a persistent question, and psychologists have tried to understand his mindset, looking back.
What sort of things do they suggest?
Well, looking at his writings, his behavior, they point to possibilities like extreme loneliness, introversion, social anxiety, certainly narcissism, entitlement, paranoia, maybe even schizotypal traits. But these are interpretations after the fact, not formal diagnoses.
And the case forces us to ask bigger questions too, doesn't it? About society.
Absolutely. The role of sexism, racism, gun access is a huge one in the U.S. context. Mental health services, their availability, their effectiveness, and how the media covers these horrific events.
All incredibly complex issues.
With no easy answer. The sources touch on all these things, potential societal biases, the gun control debate, mental health funding, media ethics, lots to consider.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels important to say again how disturbing his actions were. The profound tragedy of it all.
Absolutely essential. And trying to understand the factors involved, it's not about making excuses for him. It's about learning, hoping we can somehow prevent future tragedies like this.
Because it is incredibly complex. Individual psychology, yes, but also online radicalization, wider societal problems.
It really resists any simple explanation.
Which leaves us, and leaves you, the listener, with a pretty challenging final thought.
Which is?
Given everything we've sort of unpacked here, this tangled web of individual issues, online influences, societal factors, what are our responsibilities as individuals, as communities, as a society? How do we recognize and address these extreme ideologies, try to prevent violence while still respecting rights and avoiding harmful stereotypes?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And there are no easy answers there either. It requires really careful, nuanced thinking long after you stop listening.